But first, tonight's top story, Rupert and James Murdoch being grilled through the evening by the British Parliament over the phone hacking scandal that has rocked Britain and now threatens its government. In his opening remarks, Rupert Murdoch has said, and I quote, "This is the most humble day of my life. I never knew of any wrongdoing and I was misled. People in the company were guilty. We had to find them and take action. I am not responsible for the fiasco, but the people I trusted are. We are ashamed of what happened, and that's why we decided to shut down News of the World. We have broken the trust of our readers." Let's play out Rupert Murdoch as he appeared and deposed before the British Parliament.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to say as well just how sorry I am and how sorry we are to particularly the victims of illegal voicemail interceptions and to their families. It's a matter of great regret of mine, my father's, and everyone at News Corporation. And these are standards, these actions do not live up to the standards that our company aspires to everywhere around the world. And it is our determination to both put things right, make sure these things don't happen again, and to be the company that I know we have always aspired to be. As for my comments, Mr. Chairman, and my statement, which I believe was around the closure of the News of the World newspaper.
Before you get to that, I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life.
You have repeatedly stated that News Corp has a zero tolerance to wrongdoing by employees. Is that right?
To me, yes.
In October 2010, did you still believe it to be true when you made your Thatcher speech and you said, "Let me be clear, we will vigorously pursue the truth and we will not tolerate wrongdoing"?
Yes.
So if you were not lying then, somebody lied to you. Who was it?
I don't know. That is what the police are investigating and we're helping them with.
But you acknowledge that you were misled?
Clearly.
Can I take you back to 2003? Are you aware that in March of that year, Rebecca Brooks gave evidence to this committee admitting paying police?
I am now aware of that. I was not aware at the time. I'm also aware that she amended that considerably very quickly afterwards.
I think she amended it 7 or 8 years afterwards. But did you or anyone else?
Sorry.
Did you or anyone else at your organisation investigate this at the time?
No.
Can you explain why?
I didn't know of it. I'm sorry. If I can just say something, and this is not as an excuse, maybe it's an explanation of my laxity. The News of the World is less than 1% of our company. I employ 53,000 people around the world who are proud and great and ethical and distinguished people, professionals in their life, and perhaps I'm spread watching and appointing people whom I trust to run those divisions.
Mr. Murdoch, I do accept you have many distinguished people who work for your company. You are ultimately responsible for the corporate governance of News Corp. So what I'm trying to establish is who knew about wrongdoing and what was involved at the time. So if I can take you forward to 2006, when Clive Goodman was arrested and subsequently convicted of intercepting voicemails, were you made aware of that?
I think so. I was certainly made aware of when they were convicted.
And what did News International do subsequent to the arrest of Clive Goodman and Glenn Mulcair to get to the facts?
We worked with the police on further investigation, and eventually we appointed, I think very quickly appointed, a very leading firm of lawyers in the city to investigate it further.
What did you personally do to investigate that after Mr. Goodman went to prison? You were obviously concerned about it.
I spoke to Mr. Hinton, who told me about it.
Okay. Can I ask, in 2008, another 2 years, why did you not dismiss News of the World chief reporter Neville Thurlbeck following the Mosley case?
I'd never heard of him.
Okay. Despite a judge making clear that Thilbeck set out to blame 2 of the women involved?
That is the first I've heard of that.
So none of your UK staff draw your attention to this serious wrongdoing, even though the case received widespread media attention?
I think my son can perhaps answer that in more detail. He was a lot closer to it.
I'll come to your son in a minute. So despite the fact that blackmail can result in a 14-year prison sentence, nobody in your UK company brought this fact to your attention?
The blackmail charge, no.
Do you think that might be because they knew you would think nothing of it?
No. I can't answer. I don't know.
Do you agree with Mr. Justice Eadie when he said that the lack of action discloses a remarkable state of affairs at News International?
No.
Mr. Murdoch, a judge found a chief reporter guilty of blackmail. It was widely reported. He says it was a remarkable state of affairs.
Why didn't he put him in jail?
Because it was a civil case. Were you aware that News International commissioned an investigation into News International emails by Harbottle and Lewis?
Yes, I didn't appoint them, but I was told of it happening.
You claimed in the Wall Street Journal that Harbottle and Lewis had made a major mistake. Can I ask what mistake you were referring to?
I think maybe that's a question again for James, but there was certainly, when we examined it, re-examined that, we found things which we immediately went to counsel with to get advice on how to present it to the police.
In their written response to this committee's questions, are you aware that News International stated that both John Chapman and Daniel Cloak reviewed these emails before forwarding them to Harbottle and Lewis?
No.
So that nobody in the company told you that 2 of your executives had reviewed the emails back
thought that I was under the understanding that everything had been sent to them.
Okay. You are aware that Lord MacDonald QC has since reviewed the emails again on behalf of News International, are you not?
Yes.
You're aware that he stated he found evidence
and he's reported to the whole board of News.
He did?
News Corporation.
And you're aware that he stated to the board that he found evidence of indirect hacking, breaches of national security, and evidence of serious crime in the Harbottle and Lewis file?
Oh, he did indeed.
And were you informed about the findings by your son, Mr. Murdoch, or by Rebecca Brooks?
I forget, but I expect it was my son. I was in daily contact with them both.
Okay. When were you informed about the payments made to Gordon Taylor and Max Clifford?
Nope.
You were not informed?
Nope.
At no point you knew that Taylor and Clifford were made payments as a result?
I never heard
Okay.
the first one.
Mr. Murdoch, at what point did you find out that criminality was endemic at News of the World?
Endemic is a very wide-ranging word, and I also had to be extremely careful not to prejudice the course of justice which is taking place now. That has been disclosed, I became aware as it became apparent. The first 2, and then I was absolutely shocked, appalled and ashamed when I heard about the Millie Dowler case only 2 weeks ago, 8 days before I saw that it was graciously received by the Dowlers.
Mr. Murdoch, why was no one fired in April when News International finally admitted that News of the World had been engaged in criminal interception of voicemails?
It was not our job to get in the course of justice. It was up to the police to bring those charges and to carry out their investigation, which we were 100% cooperating with.
But in April, the company admitted liability for phone hacking, and nobody took responsibility for it then. No one was fired. The company admitted that they'd been involved in criminal wrongdoing, and no one was fired. Why was that?
There were people in the company which apparently were guilty, and we have to find them and we have to deal with them appropriately.
Did you close the paper down because of the criminality?
Yes, we felt ashamed of what had happened and thought we were going to bring it to a close.
People lied to you and lied to their readers.
We had broken our trust with our readers.
Quite a remarkable exhibition there of British Parliament at work. MPs grilling the world's most powerful media mogul, Rupert Murdoch, on the allegations of phone hacking and criminality and worse. Let's just go across for a moment to Sanjay Surya, our correspondent in London, to get a sense of what's happening outside the British Parliament, because reports now suggesting that this could go well beyond Rupert Murdoch and really involve even the British government. Let's get a sense from Sanjay outside the British Parliament.
We had the remarkable admission from Rupert Murdoch that he has been entering 10 Downing Street through the back door. And this was not just an occasion that happened once. This seems to have been regular practice. He, in fact, corrected himself to say that this has been practiced even when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister. A very vivid revelation of a nexus between the police, the politicians, and the media. And this question is, of course, at the heart of this whole dispute. Rupert Murdoch did not quite satisfactorily answer many of the questions thrown at him, and that perhaps is because as overall head he is not very familiar with the details and with the transactions, but they did make the point, the questions and the lack of answers, that he was not quite aware and that he was not quite reacting as he should have to what was going on within his empire, and that this ignorance itself is in a way culpable.
Okay, so Rupert Murdoch, in a sense, in the dock at the moment. The big question that we are going to raise on India at 9, will the Indian media ever match the standards of accountability that are being followed and we are seeing today in the United Kingdom? Special panel joining us tonight. Vinod Mehta, editor-in-chief of The Outlook, is with us. Anil Dharkar, senior journalist from Mumbai. Alec Padamsee, advertising personality, with us to look at the world of marketing and how that plays a role in the Murdoch empire. Also with us, Siddharth Vardarajan, chief of bureau of The Hindu. Akila Shivdas, Center for Advocacy and Research that looks at media-related issues. And Dilip Cherian, founder and consulting partner of Perfect Relations. Thank you all very much for joining us. Let me get quick responses from all of you to what we've been seeing unfolding, reality TV in a sense, in front of the British Parliament. Vinod Mehta, your first reactions. This is quite incredible, isn't it? That this is how parliamentary democracy functions. The world's most powerful media mogul is being interrogated literally in the gaze of the entire universe.
And Rajdeep, you can see how uncomfortable he is. This man who can make or break prime ministers or president is in a sense in the dock, and there's a kind of inquisition going on. But the first thing that I take away is how brilliant this televised inquisition is. We have been talking for years about standing committees of parliament being owned to the media. Here is an example of very rigorous, very detailed, very aggressive, very pointed questioning, but very civilized questioning. And therefore, the objections to our objections to our parliamentarians say that people will be playing to the gallery. Nobody was playing to the gallery. It was to the point, it was sober, and if you ask me, Rajdeep, Rupert Murdoch was lying through his teeth.
Okay, fair enough.
That was quite clear.
Rupert Murdoch appeared evasive. He certainly has been exposed in a sense on reality TV. Anil Dharkar, do you get a sense that, as Vinod Mehta suggesting that this is an example of how democracy should function? Here's the interrogation of one of the world's most powerful men being carried out by Parliament in front of the cameras, not in some hidden chamber. And that's part of the reason why Britain is where it is and India is where it is when it comes to parliamentary democracy.
Yeah, that I agree with. And you know, occasionally I watch on BBC, I watch parliamentary procedures in Britain. And then on Doordarshan we watch our parliament, and you see the difference. And it's actually quite shameful the way our MPs behave and the civilized manner in which their MPs behave. But I want to make this point that let's not get carried away with British democracy, because the government is doing what it is doing now only because it's got its back to the wall. When the scandal erupted and it has got very, very close to people in the government, including the Prime Minister, only then has this inquisition started. Okay. Until now, the scandal of the news of the world has been going on for years, and no one has done much about it. The government hasn't bothered, Parliament hasn't bothered. Right. It's bothering now only because, you know, the government seems to be culpable.
Point well taken. But, you know, Alec Padamsee, as someone, a marketing man who studies body language, among other things, did you get a sense that here was Rupert Murdoch was evasive? Was he an octogenarian facing perhaps the biggest battle in his life? Or has he come out well, according to you?
No, according to me, he reminded me very much of Nixon, President Nixon, when he was being grilled. The same kind of evasive answers and the inability to give a straight answer immediately. He just seemed to be that he was not in charge. He was the chief executive of the whole empire, which he had built brick by brick, and I believe he's very interested in every single paper that he has taken over, and he decides policy and everything else. And if it is, then I would say definitely he is the man who actually should be facing charges. Rupert Murdoch is well known all over the world as the man who brought sleaze into journalism. And okay. I would suspect that that is in fact his credo. Okay. If it means tapping phones and getting information, well, that's what he would encourage.
Let me come to the central question. What are the lessons for the Indian media here from what we are seeing? Can we ever match up to those standards? Siddharth Varadarajan, Rupert Murdoch, strangely, has been exposed by the media itself. It's newspapers like The Guardian which have exposed Rupert Murdoch and his perfidy here. Anil Dharkar mentions that for 20-25 years, the news of the world was carrying this kind of salacious gossip, was doing phone hacking. But it is the media which has exposed itself. Is that one big difference between what we see in the West and what we would see here? Here you'd see probably a conspiracy of silence.
There is an unhealthy tradition in India of newspapers and television channels being very wary of criticizing each other, or pointing out each other's shortcomings. That's beginning to change a little bit. I think during the Radia Tapes episode, we've seen some willingness to take pot shots or to at least air some of this dirty linen in public. You have excellent websites like the Hoot.org, which has introduced a vibrant form of media criticism. All of us journalists read that and take its writings very seriously. But I do think that we need to have more trenchant media criticism and media commentary in our newspapers and television channels. You know, the start has to be made somewhere. But what we've seen in England, and I just want to make one comment. I'm not, you know, I don't think we should knock our parliament too much, because my one experience with the standing committee when I testified on the nuclear liability bill, I came away really impressed with the amount of research that several MPs had done and the kind of questions.
But maybe it should have been on camera. As long as it is off camera and hidden, we're never going to know what are the questions that were asked to you. The nation will never know. Here it's all playing out in the full gaze of the camera. Right. That's one lesson perhaps that we have to learn. But Akila Shivdas, there's this whole notion of media accountability. There's paid news. There is all kinds of journalism that's going on at the moment. Do you believe that all this should be coming out? Do you ever believe that would ever come out in India? Would people be willing to expose, for example, some efforts have been made in the context of paid news, but on a sustained basis of the kind that we've seen with the Murdochs in England, would the Indian media be ready to do it?
I think, just Siddharth said, things have changed, but I think they've changed too slowly and too opportunistically, when it suits them, when it's convenient to them. They're not really establishing what you're saying, very firm standards, very firm ethical standards are still not being established. And one of the things that worries you when you hear all of this is that, I think it's a wake-up call to us. We have been resisting all kinds of regulation. There is some feeble attempt now at self-regulation, but even that, even members of your self-regulation channel, even when they're caught, when they're asked to pay a fine and there are deterrents, they take it in a very cavalier manner and once again go about, committing the violations.
But because, we do have the Murdochs of the world in India, or Murdoch was seen as a role model for the last 20 years for a number of Indian proprietors. His kind of journalism or his kind of media ethics was certainly almost venerated. Particularly the manner in which he put marketing and the corporate side of the business at the top of the line. Do you believe that Indian Murdochs will learn any lesson from what they are seeing there?
The shaming of Murdoch is a great public spectacle at the moment and well deserved in many instances, all the stuff that he's been doing across the world. But there's also now suddenly, if you watch what's happening in the space, the cyberspace is also getting controlled by a few media mughals. So media monopolies are also one of the great deterrents of sound democratic norms and practices. Because as these warlords get more powerful, unless you have a parliament which, like Britain, is well researched, asks questions, puts it all on camera, you're going to find that there's going to be the backdoor kind of 10 Downing Street entry strategy.
No, hold on.
That
Murdoch says he goes through the back door into 10 Downing Street. There's nothing to say that Indian proprietors or Indian journalists and Indian editors don't also go to meet, have that kind of access, which results in a perhaps unhealthy nexus between politicians and journalists.
We all know currently that that kind of thing is what is causing anxiety, because as these people become huge monopolies, it's also difficult for governments to control them, and that is becoming an anxiety. So as I said, it's not about print or television only. I'm saying that the Googles and the Twitters are also media mughals in the making.
But the question of the kind of journalism, Vinod Mehta, that Murdoch practiced, do you believe that there are equivalents in India? His in-the-face tabloid journalism, exploiting sting operations on celebrities. Do you believe that is done can that be done on a sustained basis in India? To that extent, the Indian media is much more passive than a Murdoch.
But Rajdeep, we don't have a tabloid press in India. Let's be grateful for small mercies. But the single lesson for the Indian media is, what is the news of the world story? The news of the world story is a paper which is scoop obsessed, which is cutting corners to get stories, which is...
Hold on, Vinod. I just want to cut live to the Parliament in Britain at the moment.
The sitting is suspended for 10 minutes.
Okay, we're just cutting to CNN because there's been some trouble in that.
What seems to have happened is a disturbance in the committee room. In terms of the normal protocol, the picture has immediately gone to the wall, so we can't see what that disturbance was. From the vantage point of looking at the picture, there was a lot of noise. Something happened off to the left. It's not clear if anybody had tried to approach the Murdochs or not. Certainly it was just a question of noise and a lot of shouting, which is somewhat surprising since the hearing has been going on for nearly 2.5 hours. Why it should happen at this particularly moment isn't clear. Judging from the seconds that we saw before the camera moved off the committee and onto the wall, that picture you're looking at the moment, by the way, is bluntly the wallpaper above the committee. And that is the normal protocol both in Parliament and in these committees. If there is an incident, then it tends to move away. The only other incident there has been during this particular hearing was right at the beginning. A sign was held up saying the people against Murdoch, and there was a bit of toing and froing and a bit of shouting. We're going to show you exactly what happened so you can see for yourself again. Let's just look at those pictures again, the moment when the incident happened.
The sitting is suspended 10 minutes.
Okay, now that's what happened. So what did we see? We heard a noise of a lot of shouting. You saw James Murdoch leaping, looking to go to his father's defence. His father, Rupert Murdoch, remains seated throughout, and it doesn't seem at that point as if... there you go, look. It doesn't seem as if anything happened in terms of actually getting to the Murdochs. And then a member of the police, traditional British bobby, right the way down to the helmet, goes and joins in. We don't know what it's all about, and there you see the pictures again. We'll keep showing you that so you can make your own judgments. What have we heard over the last 2.5 hours? Long, detailed testimony. Jeffrey Robertson is a leading human rights attorney. He's argued many landmark media cases, acted both for and against Rupert Murdoch. Jeffrey is with us now. Very detailed, Jeffrey Robertson, but what do you make of what we've heard?
Well, the first interjection, Rupert said, "This is the most humble day of my life." That was his carefully rehearsed interjection, because the strategy of the Murdochs, father and son, was clearly to let James do all the talking in his rather management-speak Donald Duck accent, doing generalizations that were difficult to pin down. And this committee did rather badly, I have to say, in cross-examination. They were feckless, they weren't forensic, they didn't get at very much truth. I think the two things that came through: first, the symbol which Rupert admitted, of going to number 10 Downing Street at the Prime Minister's suggestion, going in the back door to be congratulated and thanked for his electoral support. And he'd done that with previous Prime Ministers as well. So there is a symbol of the seamy side of British democracy, the proprietor who's delivered the verdict being snuck in like a rat in the back door. The other interesting shaft of light, which had both Murdochs, I think...
Okay, those are responses that we are getting at the moment from Britain. Let's go straight to Vinod Mehta to get a sense. Vinod, sorry to interrupt you, but what has happened in the British Parliament is uncanny, bears uncanny resemblance to what happens in India. We haven't had a chappal thrower, but clearly there was an intruder who's entered Parliament, entered the proceedings, and seemingly wanted to attack the Murdochs. What does that suggest to you, that there is this latent...
Rajdeep,
yes.
He could have been one of the guys whose phone was hacked.
That's right. But what does that suggest to you, Vinod, that is there an anger against this kind of journalism where ordinary citizens have had their phones hacked into, voicemails? So long as it was celebrity tabloid journalism, it was okay. The day it affected ordinary guys, that's when the problem started.
Yeah, I just want to come back to the earlier point I was making. What is the lesson for us? One lesson for us is the News of the World newsroom was like a criminal enterprise. The editor was breathing down the neck of all her reporters, saying, "I want an exclusive, I want a special, I want a big dhamaka." And those people were terrified of this. And in their effort to produce these dhamakas and exclusives, they went and did all kinds of extra constitutional means. Now, I think this also happens in some of our own newsrooms, where editors press their reporters to get exclusives when they are not there, and in the end, the reporter manufactures an exclusive or produces a half-baked exclusive. That is at the heart of the News of the World story. A media-obsessed paper, scoop-obsessed paper, which lives on scoop, sex, crime, celebrity, and the editors breathing down the neck of reporters saying, "Where is the exclusive? Where is the story?"
Right.
And this all flows from that. This is the result of trying to get stories on a regular basis when the report and the ends that in this situation. The means justify, the ends justify the means.
That's right. But look at the anger. Look at the anger that someone should enter now the British Parliament and target Murdoch. Are you surprised? Is anyone surprised with what has happened, Siddharth? Are you surprised? to see what has happened there, that someone could, is there this anger against this kind of journalism somewhere? Everybody reads the news of the world, but there seems to be a latent anger as well.
We don't know what happened there, but if somebody physically tried to attack Mr. Murdoch, this is the act of a deranged person, quite frankly. Because, when you have a well-organized inquisitorial proceeding, exposing Mr. Murdoch.
Deranged, yes, but there's also anger. There were posters outside the British Parliament. There's a sense today that kind of journalism, which peeps into people's lives, intrudes privacy, also has its diminishing returns. And, Anil Dharkar, both you and Vinod were editors of Debonair. Perhaps the closest we've come to a tabloid magazine. Is there a sense that maybe that's where India is different from Britain? Indians, by and large, don't intrude a certain privacy. We've had sting operations, but by and large, privacy of individuals is not violated.
Yeah, before I come to that, I have a theory about what happened just now. I think the intruder was planted by the Murdochs in order to get sympathy for Rupert.
Right. That's your view. Fair enough. Fair enough. That you never know with the Murdochs, but is there a sense that we don't have that kind of tabloid journalism in this country because the nature of our journalism is very different?
No, it is. And I think the greatest examples of that are the way we deal with the private lives of our politicians. We know right from Jawaharlal Nehru's time to very recently that prime ministers have not led a completely blameless private life, yet there never has been a whiff of a scandal or anything in the media at all. We've left them alone, and that generally, I think, holds across the media. It holds for business people, it holds for everybody. So we are a little circumspect about private lives, and I think that's a saving grace, because what News of the World and other British tabloids do is pry all the time into areas where really they have no business to go into.
But hasn't there been, and if you look at page 3 coming slowly on page 1, hasn't there been a trend, and Alec Padamsi, perhaps encouraged by the marketing men of the world or the advertising men, to somehow or the other titillate? Vinod Mehta spoke about the pressure that the editor puts on the journalist for an exclusive. There's also the pressure perhaps that the marketing people will put to somehow or the other increase circulation or somehow or the other increase television rating points. And that perhaps leads to violations of basic journalistic ethics.
Please understand that I think we should get to the root of how Rupert Murdoch succeeded. Rupert Murdoch succeeded. He said he wants the widest readership. He wants the most powerful, that means the most well-read in the world. And he succeeded by buying it and changing these papers, whether it was the Sun, News of the World was always a scandal sheet, but even the Times of London, which was a very respected paper, he wanted a wide readership, just as television people want a very high TRP, television rating points. So the whole system is based on how can you get more and more readers or viewers to get into your program. And the whole trend today is that it's not to do with serious journalism, it's to do with popular journalism. And if they hacked into the lives of private people, it was only private people who were either raped or in some way involved in some scandal. It wasn't people who are having their breakfast and every day boring old people.
Alec, you got to hold.
Involved in scandals.
I just want to go back to CNN because they've got someone who has been actually in the room talking more about this intruder.
Did this shaving foam hit Rupert Murdoch in the face?
Squarely in the face, yes. Everyone was a bit surprised. Nobody reacted in time, and the person who marched forward, he was a man who appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps his 30s, threw the plate with a large amount of light blue shaving foam on it and hit him squarely in the face.
And Rupert Murdoch's wife, you say, was there, and the woman in the pink was there, and we can see in as these pictures that we're showing now, Mrs. Murdoch leaping from her seat, and did any of the Murdochs or anybody else before the police got there apprehend or get a hand on the assailant?
Not really. He was given a pretty clear line in which to throw the plate and the foam on it into his face. There was one policeman who tried to wrestle him away as soon as he had thrown it. He got a fair share of shaving foam on himself, but by then it was too little too late. Murdoch's been stunned. not injured. Wendy Murdoch, shortly afterwards, was seemed to be in fairly good spirits. She was smiling about how quickly she was able to react to this incident. Other members of Rupert Murdoch's support team, I'm not sure whether it was a legal advisor, but was also sitting in the front row, approached another policeman in astonishment, asking, how on earth can you let this happen?
All right. Okay, all right. So the question begs the question, why now? This thing's been going for 2.5 hours. Frankly, there have been moments when one, could almost have fallen asleep listening to the backward and forwardness and the answers. So why, any indication why at this point in the proceedings this chap decided to interrupt and cause the disturbance?
It's not clear. There was a minor disturbance at the very, very beginning of the select hearing when 3 protesters stood up with signs saying that Murdoch was a news criminal. They were asked to leave. So perhaps they could have waited. So there was no clear indication as to why this person who threw this plate of moments
I'm interrupting you there, Jonathan. So that I can just describe. To see the pictures we are showing now, just sorry to interrupt you, but these are CNN pictures of the man who has been arrested and the foam being wiped off his face. This is all taking place at a place called Portcullis House, which is just, I don't know, 100 yards or so, 150 yards from where I'm standing at Abingdon Green. As you say, a man in a checked shirt. I suppose the questions will be asked how he got what he got into the room, won't it, Jonathan?
Well, the security here is designed to ensure that serious weapons and other more obviously threatening objects don't make their way through. It's quite possible that he could have just brought this in and it seemed as innocuous as it was on the face of it, shaving foam. However, he obviously used it and had it prepared in this blue plastic bag that he was carrying for purposes that, well, one wouldn't typically expect from shaving foam.
Okay, there we've got Rupert Murdoch apparently attacked by shaving foam of all things. So possibly what is being suggested that maybe it was even designed perhaps for a bit of sympathy for Murdoch can't be ruled out. But, Dilip Cherian, as someone who now was once a journalist, now looks at the corporate world. Let's be honest. In this country, there are newspapers who will take the moral high ground but will sell space for shares.
Sure.
They have private treaties. These are powerful. The biggest brands in the country do this all the time. Have we ever tried to sit back and expose them on a sustained basis, on a relentless basis? Shouldn't such newspapers or news channels which do this be exposed on a sustained basis? Why does that not happen? Is it because of the corporate pressures that operate in India? Is it because journalists themselves do not want to expose one another? What prevents us from doing what the Guardian has done to Rupert Murdoch?
This atmosphere of the conspiracy of silence is something that happens as we are discussing across all sectors. So the silence is not just about media. It's about what goes on in parliament. It's what goes on in the private lives of individuals or of celebrities or of politicians. So I think that, yes, there is a huge gap in our understanding of how media functions and who is actually pulling the purse strings. And because some owners are so powerful, but it's not confined to only just a few owners. And this is the point that needs to be made. This virus has now gone fairly deep into the language media, and it's a widespread phenomena of paid news and paying money for news space at all times.
Paying money for news space, of course, is one of the problems. But Akhila Shivta, as someone who looks at media research, do you believe that there is a willingness to change? Is there a willingness across the, we know what happened to the paid news report. When I was president of Editors Guild, we tried to make that report public. Number of people resisted it. Many of the proprietors didn't want that report made public where individuals were named. What do you do in a situation like that? Editors themselves said they are helpless because their proprietors won't allow it. What do you do in those situations? Is there a need to look at the business models of newspapers and news channels, or is it just a falling ethical standard?
No, I think there are two questions that we need to raise here. One is the bogey of freedom of the press that's constantly raised whenever there is what is called a critical, appraisal or introspection. The second thing is this right to privacy. It's always assumed that because your prime ministers are, you're not intruding into their private lives, that all other private lives are, being sanctified. Not at all. People that don't matter, there is constant intrusion into their private lives. There is absolutely no deference to the right to privacy.
You're saying a television camera will enter a space where it's not supposed to enter?
They park themselves in poorer settlements. They constantly intrude. They're completely voyeuristic where people, where people don't have the kind of clout and power that, politicians have. And that's the, we are not just talking about all these issues. We are really talking about the core ethical standards.
But those core ethical standards, for example, Vinod Mehta, during the Radia tapes, there was the issue of journalistic standards and ethical standards. There was also the issue of right to privacy, which you were confronted with when you revealed many of those phone conversations. Now, would that qualify, some would say, as a violation of ethics? When we did the cash for votes, we are today under attack by competitive channels to say that you were violating journalistic ethics by using a political party to expose corruption. Now, who is going to draw the Lakshman Rekha here? Who is going to decide these rules? Or are we going by the principle, as you said, that the ends are important, the means don't matter?
See, Rajdeep, why are people like you and me appointed as editors? We make these decisions every day. What is privacy and what is public interest? And I think there is absolutely no question that public interest always trumps privacy. I mean, it's an unequal battle. If somebody says, I'm doing something in private, but this is of public interest, this affects the nation, keep it quiet, I think that's preposterous. Privacy holds when you take cameras inside somebody's house and somebody is doing something of a private nature, you show it. But if somebody is talking to I and discussing cabinet reshuffles, I think that is not something of a private nature, that is something of a public nature. But Rajdeep, I want to say one thing which is very important.
Sure.
The Indian media, dog must bite dog. There is this nonsense that dog doesn't bite dog. Dog must bite dog. And if you look at since October last year, who has exposed the big scams of this country? Whether it is Adarsh, whether it's 2G, whether it is CWG, the media has played a huge, huge role to do that. So don't knock the media. Media has got many things wrong in India, but it's got many things right.
Okay, that's an important point that, we tend to knock ourselves a bit too much. Siddharth, do you sense that what you're seeing in Britain is perhaps the end of an era of a particular kind of journalism? In India, we haven't gone through that type of journalism. We've had aberrations. Would that be fair to say that the News of the World, for example, was the highest circulated Sunday paper at the end of the day in Britain, which for years, for 20, 30 years, did titillate the viewers, did resort to gossip, did enter people's lives. In India, these are aberrations. Are we being too hard on ourselves?
We shouldn't be under any illusion that the News of the World's model of news has come to an end in the UK. What's coming to an end, hopefully, is the violation of law. In other words, using criminal means, breaking and entering, to gather so-called news. That probably will come to an end, hopefully. But the content of News of the World is very similar to Sun, very similar to Daily Mirror, very similar to Daily Mail in the UK. As I think Anil or Mr. Padamsi was saying, in India, we have a very different conception of news, thankfully. We don't regard the personal lives of leaders or others as being of news value. And, so come what may, I don't think that the Indian public is going to put up with, if somebody were to start a newspaper or do that sort of thing. I don't think that would have much traction. But the ills that we are guilty of, which is things like paid news, the pathology that Vinod spoke about, this rush to break exclusives and scoops, even when, that involves manufacturing a story. These are the sorts of things that editors and ultimately proprietors have to put a stop to. And I think there's an important principle that's come up in the Murdoch hearings. In India, we've been talking about leaders and police chiefs being accountable for the crimes, even of omission, by their subordinates. I think editors, proprietors ultimately have to take responsibility for whatever happens on their charge.
Does it at the end of the day mean the decline of the editor? Somewhere the Murdoch system of journalism meant the decline of the editor. It meant the importance of someone like Rebecca Brooks, who was the CEO of the company. Anil Dharkar, you were there when the Times of India really was seen to have killed the notion of an editor, that the editor did not exist. Do you believe that that's where that the Indian editor's ability to really influence the way the paper or a channel works has been compromised by proprietors?
Well, to give my own example, when I was editor of The Independent and also the Illustrated Weekly of India, I was as independent as you or as Vinod. And in spite of the Times, I was able to maintain that independence. And to the credit of the Jains, they never pulled me up. I left for reasons other than dissatisfaction. I just explored new possibilities in television and so on. But the point I'm trying to make is that if the editor does not kowtow, if he keeps his independence, and he does it in an impartial way, I think the proprietors respect that.
Okay, the proprietor respects the independence and autonomy of an editor. I just wanted to interrupt you again, just to go back for a moment to that hearing, because Rupert Murdoch has taken out his jacket. He's obviously decided that he's in a combative mood. Let's just listen in.
If I could put a couple of things to you. Piers Morgan, who is now a celebrity anchor at CNN, who do not appear to have asked him any questions at all about phone hacking, is a former editor of the Daily Mirror. He said in his book The Insider recently, and I quote, that the little trick of entering a standard 4-digit code allow anyone to call a number and hear all your messages. In that book, he boasted that using that little trick enables him to win Scoop of the Year on a story about Sven-Goran Eriksson. So that is a former editor of the Daily Mirror being very open about his personal use of phone hacking. Yesterday in Parliament, Paul Dacre, and indeed he was a former News of the World executive, he was boasting about a story that happened when he was the editor of the Daily Mirror. Yesterday, Paul Dacre of Associated Newspapers said to a committee of Parliament, in my view, risibly, that the Daily Mail has never in its history run a story based on phone hacking or blagging in any way. Yet Operation Motorman, of which I'm sure you, Mr. James Murdoch, your advisers will have made you aware, found the Daily Mail had 50 journalists paying for 902 pieces of information obtained by the private investigator Steve Whitmore, who have been found to have used some, shall we say, unorthodox methods. You told me earlier, Mr. Murdoch, that your advisers in prepping you to come before this committee had told you to simply tell the truth, which I think was excellent advice. Is it not the fact, is not the truth of the matter that journalists at the Daily Mail, at the News of the World, felt entitled to go out there and use blagging, deception and phone hacking because that was part of the general culture of corruption in the British tabloid press, and that they didn't kick it up the chain to you because they felt they were entitled to use the same methods as everybody else? Isn't that the plain fact of the matter?
Ms. Mensch, I am aware of those reports, the questions around other newspapers and their use of private investigators. But I think really, all I can really speak to in this matter is the behaviors and the culture at the News of the World as we understand it, how we're trying to find out what really happened in the period in question, but also, and I think importantly, it's not for me here today to impugn other newspapers, other journalists, other things like that. You've asked us.
I'm asking if the News of the World felt inured to engaging in these legal practices, particularly phone hacking, because it was so wide in British tabloid journalism. Didn't they not see it as evil as it was because it was so widespread?
Ms. Mensch, I don't accept that if a journalist on one of our papers or at a television channel or internet news operation feels that they don't have to hold themselves to a higher standard, I think that it's important that we don't say, listen, everybody was doing it and that's why people are doing this. At the end of the day, we have to have set of standards that we believe in. We have to have titles and journalists who operate to the highest possible standard, and we have to make sure that when they don't live up to that, that they are held to account. And that's really the focus for us.
Mr. Rupert Murdoch, have you considered suing Harbottle and Lewis? Have you considered suing Harbottle and Lewis?
I think
You've said in the past that you relied, the reason you did not do an internal investigation, was one of your first answers to the gentleman, was that you relied on, to my colleague Tom Watson, that you relied on the investigation by the police, the investigation by the Press and Complaints Commission, and the investigation undertaken by your solicitors, Harbottle and Lewis, under whose care this enormous pile of documents was found. There's an old saying that if you want something doing, you should do it yourself. In this case, you relied on 3 sets of people, all of whose investigations were severely lacking. Have you considered suing Harbottle and Lewis?
I think any future legal claims or actions in any matter is really a matter for the future. That's not. This really today is about how we actually make sure that these things don't happen again
and
get there. So I won't comment or speculate on any future legal matters.
Okay, the file of evidence, you were asked by my colleague Mr. Farrelly if you'd read it yourself, and you said no. Under the circumstances where you relied on other people and advisors and they've...
The tough questioning and grilling that's going on of the Murdochs. I just want to get a quick word from all my panelists. Would this ever happen in India? Quick responses, 15 seconds each. Alec Padamsi, you first. Do you believe this kind of public testimony will ever happen in this country, where media persons are put through this kind of interrogation in public?
The only reason it's happening in England is because the opposition has chubbied the whole thing so that the government is under pressure. Cameron is under tremendous pressure and he may have to resign. It is the opposition who has become the adversary and saying, yes, expose it. Now, when they are in power, probably the people who are in power now...
You're saying this could only happen in India if the opposition took it up in Parliament. But there's the question, Vinod Mehta, do you believe that that this will you'll ever see the day when we'll have our standing and select committees that are that are done in public gaze?
No.
No. Your short answer is no. Anil Dharkar, your short answer is no again?
My short answer is no, and that's because politicians are too afraid of our media.
Right.
And they're afraid because they have too much to hide.
They have too much to hide. Siddharth Varadarajan, do you believe that the day will come when we will perhaps have our media mughals, media barons, editors, all being subject to this kind of interrogation in Parliament? You know, we testified before various committees. Will that ever come before the public gaze?
I don't think it'll come, things will go that far, quite frankly. I mean, some editors did testify before the JPC, I think, or the PAC.
That's right.
On the Radia business, 2G business. But obviously that wasn't public, but some of the details were made public in the form of the report. But I don't think that precludes other forms of public interrogation. And I think ultimately readers and television viewers who are disgusted by what they read or see ought to vote with their money and say that we are not going to patronize channels or newspapers that violate basic ethical standards.
And I think as we saw some of that wrath in 2611, we saw a lot of public outcry, campaigns on the online. So I think it's not too far.
Is the public out there? You're no longer just a journalist, but you're a citizen. Do you feel that there is this anger, hatred towards the media? It's boiled over today in Britain. Perhaps some would say, if this attack was a genuine attack against Murdoch, if the is there that kind of anger against the media in this country?
The anger against the media in this country is only when it turns too shrill. But if you ask me, the anger against politics and the nature of the polity is much higher.
So the media exposing the politician
finds public support, actually.
Finds public support and sympathy. Let me take a break at this point. We're going to continue, of course, with our special coverage in a moment from now. Sagrika Ghosh will take us through much more. Remember, this is a big news day. The world's biggest media mogul, someone who controls newspaper empires across several continents, is being grilled in the British Parliament. He's even been attacked by shave foam by an intruder. It doesn't really, in that sense, get bigger than it. What's our editor's take on this issue? We believe accountability is a critical element of any democratic setup. Unfortunately, in India, we follow democracy in letter, but not always in spirit. The media in particular has never quite observed the standards we demand of others, be it paid news or other forms of ethical failings. Somehow we have never turned the gaze inwards. Maybe what's happening to the Murdochs in Britain is a wake-up call to all of us in the Indian media.